The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the busy city streets as the hum of traffic filled the air. On this ordinary evening, no one could have predicted that the events about to unfold would change the lives of everyone involved forever. In a neighborhood where tensions often ran high, a seemingly simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that no one could have foreseen. It all started when a young black teen, Jamal, boarded the bus, a backpack slung over his shoulder, and a mind full of dreams. His life had always been shaped by the challenges of growing up in a world where his skin color often made him a target. But Jamal wasn't the kind of person to let the weight of the world keep him down. He had a quiet confidence about him, a sense of purpose that many overlooked. He wasn't interested in the petty dramas that surrounded him. All he wanted was to make it through each day, maybe even make a difference, if the chance ever came his way. That chance would come sooner than he thought. As Jamal found a seat, the bus made its usual stops. At one of the next corners, an elderly woman with a baby bump boarded. Her face showed the tiredness of a long day, and it didn't take Jamal long to notice she was struggling to find a seat. Without hesitation, Jamal stood up and offered her his spot, the act simple but powerful. The woman smiled warmly at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, young man," she said softly, settling into the seat. But there was something about her that Jamal couldn't quite place. She didn't look like the usual person he'd meet on his daily commute. She seemed different. What Jamal didn't know was that the woman wasn't just an ordinary passenger on the bus. She wasn't just a tired, pregnant mother who needed a seat. No, she was something far more dangerous, a government operative with a secret she would do anything to protect. And she wasn't the only one hiding something that day. The bus continued down the street, unaware of the storm that was brewing. A few blocks away, two police officers were finishing up their shift when they received a tip, a vague lead that would send them on a mission that would intersect with Jamal's life in the most unexpected way. They had been instructed to keep an eye on a black vehicle, known for its ties to criminal activities, and were ready to make a stop. It wasn't long before they spotted it, cruising down the road, its tinted windows hiding the identity of its driver. A signal flashed between the officers, and they moved in, prepared for what they thought would be a routine stop. But what they didn't know was that the driver of that vehicle wasn't just any random person. It was an undercover FBI agent, a part of a top-secret operation that was about to take a dangerous turn. The agents had been tracking a criminal organization for months, gathering intel and building a case that could dismantle the entire syndicate. But the stop on that day, with its racial undertones, would disrupt their plans in ways they could never have imagined. They didn't know it yet, but the teenager who had just given up his seat to the pregnant woman and the FBI agent were about to cross paths in the most intense, heart-stopping way. The officers approached the car, their hands resting on their weapons, their eyes sharp and ready for confrontation. But as they reached the driver's side, the tension in the air grew thicker. Jamal, unaware of the growing danger, was still on the bus, the innocent kindness of his gesture carrying with it consequences that would ripple through everything. The woman, still sitting quietly in her seat, watched as the two police officers questioned the driver. She noticed the way the officers spoke to the man, aggressive, as if they were trying to provoke him. The air was thick with hostility. Her mind raced. She could see the situation escalating, but she couldn't intervene. Not yet. Her mission required patience. She had been instructed to stay in the background, to gather information without drawing attention to herself. Back on the bus, Jamal shifted uneasily in his seat, sensing something wasn't right. The bus was moving slower than usual, stuck in the traffic just a few blocks away from the confrontation. The police officers were now shouting at the driver, their voices filled with suspicion and accusation. Jamal's gut twisted. He knew how these situations could escalate. He had seen it far too many times on the news. His instincts told him something was wrong, but he had no idea how deep the danger ran. Then, just as Jamal was about to stand up and make his way to the front of the bus to get off, he saw the flash of blue lights. The police had made their move. His heart skipped a beat. His feet felt heavy, as if the weight of the world had suddenly landed on his shoulders. He couldn't help but watch, his eyes glued to the scene unfolding outside. The officers seemed to be growing more agitated with every passing second, and the man in the car wasn't backing down. But then something incredible happened. In the midst of the confrontation, a single car door opened, slowly, deliberately. And from that moment on, everything changed. What Jamal didn't know was that the man in that car wasn't just another target of racial profiling. He was an FBI agent on a mission that would unravel everything Jamal thought he knew about the world around him. As the officer reached for the door handle, ready to pull the driver out, the man's voice rang out, calm but filled with authority. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said. The officer paused, his hand freezing midair. For a split second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Jamal's stomach churned. His mind raced. He had no idea what was going on, but he could feel the tension rise, thick enough to cut through the air. The woman sitting beside him, the one he had helped just moments ago, seemed to know more than she was letting on. Her eyes were sharp, observing everything carefully, as if she were waiting for something. The driver of the car, the FBI agent, was no longer just a man. He had become part of a larger web of secrets, and Jamal had unwittingly become a part of that web. He had no idea that his simple act of kindness was the spark that would ignite a dangerous series of events. In that moment, Jamal felt a shift in the atmosphere, a ripple of uncertainty that hung heavily over him. Would the truth come to light? Would the police back off? Or would they escalate the situation? And what about the pregnant woman? Who was she really, and what was her connection to all of this? Was she an innocent bystander, or did she have a hand in the unfolding chaos? As the bus lurched forward, Jamal's world seemed to slow down. He could feel the weight of the eyes around him, the looks of curiosity, fear, and uncertainty. What had he gotten himself into? And what was the next move for the FBI agent, the police officers, and the mysterious woman who had given him a life-changing note? The answer to those questions lay just beyond the horizon, waiting for Jamal to make a choice that could alter the course of his life forever. Jamal's heart was racing as he stood frozen in his seat, staring through the bus window. The blue lights flickered in the distance, casting an eerie glow on the street as the two police officers, now visibly tense, circled the car with the FBI agent inside. The scene outside seemed like something straight out of a movie, but Jamal knew better. This wasn't Hollywood. This was real life, and it was happening right in front of him. The bus jerked slightly as it came to a stop at the next intersection, its tires screeching faintly against the pavement. Jamal's gaze flicked back to the woman sitting across from him, the pregnant woman he had given his seat to only moments before. She had been staring at the scene outside the entire time, her face unreadable, but something in the way she held herself told Jamal she wasn't just a bystander. Her hands, resting on her belly, were steady, almost unnervingly so. There was a calmness in her posture that struck him as out of place, considering the chaos unfolding just yards away. He couldn't help but wonder who she really was. Why had she gotten on the bus at that exact moment? Why had she chosen to sit next to him, of all people? There was something about her that didn't sit right with Jamal, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow connected to what was happening outside. Jamal's fingers fidgeted with the strap of his backpack. His mind was racing, trying to process everything. He had lived in this neighborhood his whole life. He knew how things could escalate between the police and black men. He had seen it firsthand, heard the stories, felt the tension in the air every time he passed by a patrol car. He knew better than to get involved, to draw attention to himself, but now, with the events outside unfolding, something felt different. He felt like he was on the edge of something big, something dangerous, and he couldn't quite figure out what it was. The bus doors closed with a heavy thud, and the vehicle lurched forward, inching toward the front of the line of cars stopped at the intersection. The lights ahead flickered, and Jamal could barely hear the muffled sound of the officers' voices through the closed window. They were arguing now, their gestures growing more animated. Whatever was going on, it was escalating, and Jamal couldn't look away. His eyes darted back to the woman next to him, but she hadn't moved an inch. She was still watching the scene outside, her expression unreadable. And then, as if on cue, the woman's voice broke the silence. "You should go. she said quietly, her words soft but firm. Jamal blinked, startled by the sudden interruption. Go where? He asked, his voice low. She glanced at him, her gaze steady, and for the first time, he noticed the intensity in her eyes. You're in danger, she said, her tone carrying an edge that made Jamal's stomach tighten. You don't realize it yet, but you're involved in something much bigger than you think. Jamal's mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. He didn't know who she was, but there was something about her that made him feel like she knew far more than she was letting on. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shifted in her seat, her hands gently rubbing her swollen belly. Jamal's eyes followed her movements, his pulse quickening. There was something about the way she carried herself, like she was trying to stay calm, but was on edge at the same time. It was as if she was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to act, but she wasn't sure when that moment would come. The bus jerked again, this time with a little more force, and Jamal's attention snapped back to the scene outside. The officers were now standing by the car, their hands resting on their guns, their postures tense. The man in the car, the FBI agent, remained calm, his face unreadable as he spoke to them. Jamal couldn't hear the words, but the situation felt like it was about to explode. Look at them, the woman murmured, her eyes fixed on the officers. They don't know who they're dealing with. Jamal's throat tightened. Who are they? He asked, his curiosity now mixing with a growing sense of dread. The woman's lips tightened into a thin line. That man in the car, he's not just anyone. He's someone they'll regret messing with. But right now, they don't have a clue. Jamal swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. Who was this man, and why was he so important? And why was she telling him all of this? He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but he knew he couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at him, the sense that his life had just been thrown into a dangerous new direction. The sound of a loud engine revving drew Jamal's attention back to the car outside. The officers had clearly grown impatient, and one of them stepped closer to the driver's side, shouting something that Jamal couldn't hear. The other officer had his hand on his gun now, his posture even more aggressive than before. Jamal's heart raced. He knew what was coming. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and the woman beside him seemed to sense it too. This is where it gets dangerous, she whispered, leaning closer to Jamal. Her voice dropped lower, barely audible over the noise of the bus's engine. You have to be careful. They're going to make a move. And when they do, it won't just be about them anymore. Jamal's head spun.
Who are they?
The woman didn't answer at first. Instead, her eyes flicked back to the scene outside, where the officers were now moving quickly, their hands twitching near their weapons. The atmosphere had become unbearably tense. Jamal could feel it in his bones. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. Just as he was about to ask the woman another question, a sudden, sharp crack split the air. It wasn't a gunshot, but it was close enough to make Jamal's heart skip a beat. The officers had drawn their weapons, but the FBI agent was still seated in the car, unbothered. The tension was unbearable. And then, without warning, the woman grabbed Jamal's wrist. Her grip was firm, urgent. Get off this bus. Now, she said, her voice low but commanding. Jamal's mind was racing. What was going on? Why was she so determined to get him out of there? He glanced back toward the front of the bus, his eyes catching the driver's nervous expression as he looked into the rearview mirror. Whatever was going on, it was all happening too fast. The woman gave him a knowing look. They're coming for you next. The words hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. He didn't know who they were, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't about to stick around to find out. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as the woman's grip tightened on his wrist. She was strong. Despite her pregnancy, her fingers like iron around his skin. He looked at her face, the urgency in her eyes almost sending a chill down his spine. She wasn't just a bystander. She was involved, deeply involved in whatever was happening outside, and now, somehow, she was pulling him into it. Why me? Jamal's voice was barely a whisper, but his question hung heavy in the air between them. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, Her eyes flicked toward the back of the bus, where the rearview mirror reflected the growing chaos. The officers were yelling at the FBI agent now, their faces twisted with anger and suspicion. The tension outside had reached a boiling point. And Jamal? He was stuck in the middle of it all, unsure whether to run or to stay and try to make sense of it. "Because you're already a part of it," she finally said, her voice low but steady. "You've made your choice without even knowing it. That act of kindness you showed me? It wasn't random. It brought you into this. Now you have to make a choice. Stay, and you'll get caught up in something that could change your life forever. Or leave, and hope it doesn't follow you." Jamal blinked, trying to process her words. He had only given up his seat on the bus to a pregnant woman. How had that simple gesture led him into this dangerous game of cat and mouse? He had no answers, only more questions. And the more he thought about it, the more his gut told him there was far more at play here than a routine police stop. "I don't understand," Jamal muttered, pulling his wrist out of her grip, although the woman didn't seem to mind. She was calm now, like she had expected him to resist. "You don't have to understand. You just have to decide," she replied, her eyes fixed on the officers outside, who were growing more hostile by the second. "You've seen what's happening. You know what happens next if you stay. The moment they realize who he is, the agent in the car, they'll do whatever it takes to keep their cover intact." Jamal felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The tension outside the bus was palpable now, the kind of tension he had seen before in the news. The kind that led to chaos, destruction, and innocent lives being torn apart. He could almost feel the officers' eyes on him, like they knew he was involved. The woman was right. He was already a part of something bigger than he could ever have imagined. But as much as Jamal's instincts told him to run, there was something in his gut that made him hesitate. He had to know more. What was really going on here? Who was this FBI agent? And why had the police officers chosen today to make their move? Without realizing it, Jamal found himself standing up, his feet moving on their own accord. The woman didn't stop him, but her eyes followed his every move. He made his way toward the front of the bus, his body tensing as the bus creaked to a halt in the middle of the street. His mind raced with possibilities, but none of them felt right. Every time he thought he had a handle on the situation, something else would make him second-guess himself. He glanced back at the woman, her face unreadable, her hands still resting protectively on her stomach. The driver of the bus was watching him now, his eyes wide with confusion. Jamal reached the door, but as he looked out the window, he saw something that froze him in place. A car, a dark sedan, was pulling up behind the bus, its headlights casting long shadows across the street. Jamal's pulse quickened. He didn't know why, but he knew that car wasn't just another passerby. He had seen that car before. His mind raced. The car was identical to one that had been parked near his neighborhood earlier that week. Jamal had noticed it when he walked home from school. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, in the midst of everything unfolding, the sight of it sent a wave of nausea over him. "Are you sure about this?" The woman's voice came from behind him, sharp with concern. "Because once you step off this bus, there's no going back." Jamal didn't answer. He couldn't answer. His thoughts were jumbled, his instincts at war with his sense of self-preservation. He could hear the muffled voices of the officers outside, growing louder as they argued with the FBI agent. But the arrival of the dark sedan was all he could focus on. It wasn't a coincidence. He was being watched, tracked.
But why?
Without thinking, Jamal turned back to the woman, his eyes wide with fear. "What's going on? What do they want with me?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You've seen the agent. He's part of something much bigger than you or me. But there's something else, something they've been watching you for." Jamal felt the blood drain from his face. "Me?" The woman nodded slowly. "You're not just a bystander in all of this. Your involvement goes deeper. It's why they're interested in you. And why, when they find out the truth about you, they won't stop until they have you." Jamal's mind spun. What truth? But before she could answer, the doors of the bus slid open, and two men stepped onto the vehicle. Jamal's breath caught in his throat as he recognized them immediately. Both were the same men who had been sitting in the dark sedan that had just parked behind the bus. They were wearing plain clothes, but the way they moved, the way they scanned the room, made it clear they were anything but ordinary. They weren't here for a simple bus stop. They were here for something much more specific. Jamal's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The officer outside the bus had stopped yelling. Now, they were both watching the two men with wary eyes, unsure of how to react. The woman behind him didn't flinch. She knew exactly who these men were. Jamal could feel the weight of her gaze on him. He could hear the urgency in her voice as she said, "You need to get off this bus. Now." But it was too late. The two men made their way toward Jamal. There was no time to think, no room for doubt. The moment they reached him, everything would change. Jamal's heart hammered in his chest as the two men moved toward him. Every step they took felt like an eternity. The bus seemed to grow quieter with each passing second, the world outside fading into a muffled blur as his focus narrowed solely on them. The woman was still behind him, but Jamal couldn't look back. He could feel her presence, the weight of her words, but all of his attention was now consumed by the men who were closing in. They moved with purpose, their eyes sharp, scanning the bus as if they were looking for something, or someone in particular. The air around Jamal grew thick with tension, and he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The man closest to him, a tall figure in a dark suit, locked eyes with Jamal, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to stop. Jamal's throat went dry. He didn't know whether to run or to stay and face whatever was coming next. His mind raced, replaying everything that had happened so far. The police stop. The woman. The FBI agent. The dark sedan. Each moment felt like a piece of a puzzle, but he couldn't see the full picture. All he knew was that he had somehow become entangled in something far beyond his control, and now it was coming for him. The woman's voice cut through the thick silence. "Don't let them get you," she said, urgency in her tone. "You're not safe here anymore." Jamal turned to her, his chest tightening. "What do they want from me?" The words escaped before he could stop them. But the woman didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the men, who were now only a few feet away. The tall man stopped in front of Jamal, his eyes scanning his face, as if he were searching for a hidden truth. Jamal's pulse quickened as the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, black folder. He held it out for Jamal to see, but Jamal didn't move. The folder wasn't just a folder. It felt like an invitation to something much darker. Something Jamal didn't want to be part of. "You're in this deeper than you think," the man said, his voice cold and deliberate. "We need to talk." Jamal swallowed hard, his mind spinning. What did he even say to that? What could he say? The tension was so thick now that it was almost suffocating. Jamal's fingers trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the seat, trying to steady himself. He needed answers. Answers that would explain how he had gone from a normal day on the bus to standing face to face with men who were clearly anything but ordinary. Behind him, the bus driver glanced nervously in the rearview mirror, his knuckles white from gripping the wheel. The other passengers were silent, too afraid to make a sound. Jamal could feel their eyes on him, the weight of their unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air. He was the center of attention now, but all he wanted was to disappear. The man in front of him didn't seem to care about anyone else. His focus was entirely on Jamal, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed down to just the two of them. The silence stretched, taut like a wire ready to snap. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jamal finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. He tried to keep his composure, but inside, every nerve was screaming at him to run, to get away from these men, from this situation. He wasn't part of whatever was going on. He was just a kid, a teenager trying to get by, trying to survive. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, signaling to the other man who had been standing at the back of the bus, watching silently. The second man took a step forward, his hand resting lightly on the handle of his gun. The sight of it made Jamal's breath catch in his throat. "I'm not looking for trouble," Jamal said quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. I just want to go home." But the man didn't seem interested in what Jamal had to say. His eyes, cold and calculating, flicked back to the black folder in his hand. He opened it slowly, revealing a series of documents and photographs that made Jamal's blood run cold. There, among the pages, was a photo of him. Jamal's stomach dropped. How did they have a photo of him? And why was he in it? "You've been under observation for a while now, Jamal," the man said, his voice low and measured. "We know who you are. We know what you've been doing. And we need you to understand one thing. You're not leaving here until you're part of the bigger picture." The words hit Jamal like a punch. His mind raced, scrambling to make sense of it all. This wasn't just about a police stop. This wasn't just about the FBI agent or the woman on the bus. This was about something much bigger, something that involved him, whether he liked it or not. The woman behind him shifted, her eyes narrowing as she took a step forward. "You need to back off," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "or this will get ugly." Jamal turned to her, confused. What was she doing? She was pregnant, clearly outnumbered, and yet there was something about her that made him hesitate. She wasn't afraid. Not like he was. In fact, she seemed almost calm, like she had seen this type of thing before. The man in front of Jamal didn't seem fazed by her words. He barely glanced at her before his gaze returned to Jamal, who was now feeling more trapped than ever. The air was electric with tension, the silence hanging heavy as the two men waited for Jamal's next move. He was surrounded on all sides, and the weight of their expectations crushed him. "What do you want from me?" Jamal asked again, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to stay strong. The man didn't answer immediately. He looked at Jamal for a long moment, studying him, as though trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally he spoke. "We need you to help us," he said quietly, but the finality in his tone made Jamal's blood run cold. "Whether you like it or not, you're already in this. It's just a matter of how far you're willing to go." The words echoed in Jamal's mind, a chilling promise that made his heart race. There was no turning back now. But he still didn't know what any of this meant, and worse yet, he had no idea who was pulling the strings. The danger wasn't just outside the bus anymore. It was inside it, standing right in front of him. And Jamal had no choice but to face it head-on. Jamal's heart was racing, but his mind was starting to clear. The man in front of him had just revealed something he wasn't ready for. The truth that he had been under surveillance, that his life was connected to something much bigger than he could have imagined. But there was no time to process it. The tension in the air felt suffocating, the pressure mounting as the seconds ticked by. Jamal realized that whatever was happening, he had to make a decision now. He could either step into the world that the man and the others were offering him, or he could run and risk everything he knew, including the safety of his family, his friends, and even his own life. "I'm not your pawn," Jamal said, his voice trembling, but stronger now. "I'm not a part of whatever this is. You've got the wrong person." The man stared at him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Without warning, the bus doors slammed shut, and the sound of sirens blared in the distance. Jamal's gut told him it wasn't just a coincidence. Something was coming, something big. The woman behind him took a deep breath, her calm demeanor shattering as she suddenly moved toward the front. "You don't understand," she said urgently. "They're not just after you. They're after all of us." Before Jamal could react, the man in the dark suit turned sharply to the side, eyes narrowing. His hand moved to his earpiece, muttering something too low for Jamal to hear. The bus was about to be surrounded. But who was surrounding them? Who was this group that was so determined to get their hands on him? Jamal's mind was racing with possibilities. Suddenly, the woman grabbed him by the arm, her grip firm but not painful. "We don't have time. They'll come for us for real if we don't get out now. Trust me." Jamal was about to argue, to tell her that he wasn't just going to run, but then he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. From the back of the bus, the second man, the one with the gun, was now at the rear exit, talking to someone in a low voice. Jamal's eyes locked onto the man's expression. He was clearly worried, tense. Something wasn't right. "Why are you really here?" Jamal asked, his voice low but insistent. "What do you want with me? What's all this about?" The woman hesitated before answering. I wasn't just on this bus for no reason, Jamal.
I knew you would help me.
I knew you would give up your seat. Everything that's happening, was meant to happen. But not because of me. It's because of who you are. Jamal's mind reeled. Who he was. What did that even mean? He wasn't anything special. He was just a teenager trying to get by. I don't get it, he muttered, the words slipping from his lips before he could stop them. You're the one they're after, Jamal, the woman said, her voice almost a whisper. The truth is, you're more than just a bystander in this world. You're part of a much bigger plan. And that photo? It wasn't just about your face. It was about who you're connected to. The words felt like a punch in the gut. Jamal took a step back, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. What are you talking about? Who am I connected to? Before she could answer, the bus doors burst open, and in rushed a team of uniformed officers, weapons drawn. Jamal froze, his heart thudding against his chest. His instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. He was trapped. Get on the ground, one of the officers shouted, but the tension in the air was so thick that it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. Jamal's mind was a whirlwind. How had they found him so quickly? Had the woman known this would happen? Was this part of the plan all along? Just as he started to drop to the floor, ready to comply, he saw the last person he expected, the FBI agent, the one who had been in the car earlier, now stepping through the doors of the bus. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes locked onto Jamal immediately. The officer who had shouted froze when he saw the agent, confusion flickering in his eyes. The tension in the room shifted, like an invisible wall of uncertainty had just come crashing down. The agent didn't look at the officers. His gaze was solely on Jamal. Don't listen to them, the agent said, his voice calm but laced with authority. They're not who they say they are. You've been set up. Jamal's heart raced faster. His mind spun, trying to process the impossible claim the agent had just made. Set up? By who? For what? The woman moved forward, standing between Jamal and the agent. It's true, she said, her voice soft but resolute. They've been watching you, but it's not because of who you are. It's because of who they think you are. Jamal's mind reeled with questions, too many to answer. But before he could speak, the agent stepped forward, his hand raised. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to protect you. For a long moment, Jamal just stared at him, uncertainty flooding every inch of his body. He didn't know what to think. He didn't know who to trust. And then, just as everything seemed to hang in the balance, the agent pulled out a small envelope from his coat. He handed it to Jamal, and as Jamal took it, the agent spoke in a low, quiet tone. Everything you think you know is a lie. They've been watching you because you have something they need, something your family has kept hidden for years. Jamal's fingers shook as he tore open the envelope, the contents spilling out onto his lap. There, in front of him, was a picture, one of his parents, standing together in front of a large building. But there was something more. A symbol hidden within the image. A symbol he recognized. It was the same symbol he had seen before, on the back of the black folder. His stomach dropped. The twist was worse than he could have ever imagined. His family wasn't just ordinary. They were a part of something dangerous, something bigger than he could ever comprehend. Before he could speak, the agent whispered, They've been watching your parents for years. And now, they're coming for you. The words echoed in his mind as everything he thought he knew about his life shattered in an instant. Jamal stared at the picture in his lap, the weight of it heavy in his hands. His breath was shallow, his heart racing as the world around him seemed to collapse into chaos. Everything he thought he knew, his normal life, his simple routine, even the way he had viewed his parents, was suddenly called into question. The agent's words echoed in his mind, and every part of him wanted to deny it. But the reality was there, staring him in the face, as undeniable as the symbol in the photo. His family, his parents, had been hiding something. They were part of something that had now dragged him into a world he wasn't prepared for. The bus had fallen eerily quiet. The officers who had stormed in moments ago were still, unsure of what to do. The agent's presence had shifted the atmosphere entirely. The woman who had urged Jamal to trust her had stepped back, her expression unreadable now as she waited for what came next. Jamal slowly lifted his gaze, his mind still racing with too many thoughts to process. "What do you mean they've been hiding something?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. His throat felt dry, the words barely coming out as the weight of the situation hit him harder than ever. The agent's expression softened, though his eyes remained intense. "Your parents were part of an organization," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "A group that's been working in the shadows for years, trying to prevent something much bigger than any of us. Your family has been protecting a key piece of information, a secret that, if it falls into the wrong hands, could destroy everything." Jamal's mind was spinning. The picture in his lap now felt like an anchor pulling him deeper into a world he didn't understand. "But why me?" he asked, the question burning in his chest. "Why not them? Why did they leave me out of it?" The agent sighed, looking as if he had to weigh his words. "Because they've kept you hidden. You weren't supposed to know about this world. You were meant to live a normal life, free from the dangers they faced. But things have changed. You're no longer safe, Jamal. The group we've been watching, those officers, the ones who were trying to corner you, they've been tracking you for a reason. They know who you are, and now that they know, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." The weight of it all was too much for Jamal to process. He could feel his heart thudding in his chest as the world around him seemed to spin. The agent's words had shaken him to the core. His family, his parents, they weren't just regular people. They had been part of something dark, something dangerous, and now it was all coming to him. "I don't want this," Jamal finally whispered, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over him. "I didn't ask for any of this." The agent looked at him, understanding in his gaze. "I know. No one ever asks for this, but sometimes fate doesn't give us a choice. You have a part to play in this, Jamal. You've always had a part to play. It's just a matter of accepting it." Jamal felt his chest tighten. He had spent his whole life trying to stay out of trouble, to stay under the radar, and now everything was falling apart. The people who had been protecting him, who had given him the life he knew, were now gone, caught up in this mess. "Why are you helping me?" Jamal asked, his voice cracking. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. Why are you risking everything for me?" The agent paused before answering. "Because your family isn't the only one with secrets. I've been watching you, Jamal. I've seen the way you've handled yourself, the way you've protected others without thinking twice. That's not something you learn by accident. You've got something inside of you, something that's been dormant. And now, it's time to wake up." Jamal was silent for a long time, processing everything the agent had said. The bus, the officers, the woman behind him, all of it felt like a distant memory now, as if he had stepped into a different world entirely. He thought about the people he had once trusted, the life he had built for himself. It was all slipping through his fingers, and the weight of it was suffocating. But then something inside him shifted. He remembered the note from the woman, the way she had spoken to him, urgency in her words, but also hope. She had been trying to protect him, to guide him out of this storm. She had known what was coming. Maybe she had known the truth all along. "Where do we go from here?" Jamal finally asked, his voice steadier now, though the uncertainty was still there. "What do I do?" The agent looked at him with a mixture of respect and something else, something darker. "You come with me," he said. "You trust me. And together, we stop this before it's too late." Jamal didn't hesitate. The uncertainty, the fear, it was still there, but so was something else, a spark of determination. Maybe he didn't have all the answers. Maybe he didn't understand everything that was happening. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back.
Not now.
"Let's go," Jamal said, standing up slowly, his hands still shaking, but his resolve growing stronger with every word. The woman smiled faintly, as if she had known this was the moment that would come. She stepped forward, nodding toward the agent. "It's not just about surviving anymore," she said softly. "It's about fighting for something that matters." As Jamal followed the agent off the bus, the weight of the decision settled on his shoulders. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him or what dangers lay ahead. But he was no longer just a passive player in a game that he didn't understand. He was part of it now, whether he liked it or not. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. As the bus pulled away, leaving the confusion and chaos behind, Jamal glanced back one last time. The city, the life he knew, it all seemed so far away now, a distant memory. He was stepping into a world of shadows and secrets, a world that was just beginning to reveal its darkest corners. But Jamal was ready to uncover the truth, ready to fight. And whatever happened next, he wouldn't be facing it alone. The end of one chapter had only just begun the beginning of another.